All right, it's 1 p.m., so we'll get started. So, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our employer education.
We will review any fields that need.
So, today's session is part of our employer education program, which is a key component to managing risk to the plan, and it is tied to our employer attestation of compliance initiative. Today, we will be providing an overview of the data collection tool, which is commonly referred to as the DCT, and the steps that you will take to extract, import, validate, and correct errors. We will also provide some examples of how you can load and validate your data prior to submitting. So with me today are Trina Willert and Evelyn Andel, who are pension analysts from our employer services team, and also Sean McFarland, who's a finance administrator with our finance team. Trina and Evelyn will be walking us through the DCT process, and Sean will be reviewing the contribution reconciliation process. So now I'll pass the presentation over to Trina for the overview of the DCT.
Thank you, Bill. What is DCT? DCT stands for Data Collection Tool. As the name suggests, the Data Collection Tool is a data collection site used to collect member data from our employers. The data collection year is from January 1st to December 31st. This slide provides a brief outline of the DCT process. Step 1. Employers receive the DCT data from CAT. Any data you previously submitted to CAT for 2020 has been loaded into the DCT. It includes the demographic information and any in-year data that was reported to CAT during the plan year January 1st to December 31st. Step 2. When you receive the data, it should be exported, reviewed, and reconciled against your in-year data. This will help to identify any missing enrollments, status changes, and discrepancies in reported earnings and contributions. However, if you only have a few members, you can review these members individually on the site rather than exporting the data from the DCT. Step 3. After the data has been reconciled, you must upload the following files as applicable in the order they appear: status update file, earnings and contributions file, and member information and year-end updates file. Step 4. After loading the files, you will review and correct any errors that appear after running your data validations. Step 5. Once your data has been cleaned up, run validations, and if no errors, you can then proceed with Step 6 and submit your data to CAT. The DCT Guide is a great resource to help you through the process. The DCT Guide will be available on January 22nd under the Help dropdown in the DCT. The guide provides a detailed process overview, instructions on how to navigate the DCT, explanations of the warnings and errors, as well as the corrective actions required, and examples of common scenarios. There is also a DCT submission checklist to assist you with submitting the DCT. This checklist is available on our CAT website under Employer Education Guide, Data Reporting. As always, you can contact your employer pension analyst with any questions. The DCT will be available to you on January 22nd, and the submission deadline is March 15th, 2021. Here is the link to access the DCT site. On the login page, enter your email address in the email field and your SDoc password in the password field. New users will receive an email with their login credentials. If you have problems logging in, please contact your employer pension analyst. Once logged in, the site will default to the home screen. This is where CAT will communicate any upcoming deadlines, tips, and DCT news. The DCT is due on March 15, 2021. However, if you finish early, submit as soon as you are finished. Let's do a quick walkthrough of the various DCT features. At the top of the home screen is the navigation ribbon. You will use the drop-down options under Member Data, Reports, Utilities, and Help to perform various tasks in the DCT. Just below the navigation ribbon is the quick search for member lookup. Right below the quick search is the member data summary. Below the member data summary are the data problems. Now I will pass it to Evelyn to go over a live demonstration.
Thank you, Trina. We will now do a demonstration of DCT and show how each of these features are used. In the navigation ribbon, the member data dropdown can be used to view and edit data, run validations, and add new members and submit data to CAT. Reports will help you through the DCT process when it comes to identifying data problems, reconciling data discrepancies, and so forth. The Utilities button is used to import, export, or reset the data. You will find the DCT guide and information about DCT under the Help function. To the far right of the screen, you will see your employer name. If you administer more than one, there will be a drop-down for you to select the employer you are working on. The Quick Search function allows you to search for a member by last name or first name, SIN, or employee number. The Member Data Summary gives a snapshot of the total number of members that are currently in the DCT, the total number of new members, and any status changes. The Data Problems gives a snapshot of all the errors and warnings that have been found after running the data validation. It will show the count for the total number of errors and warnings based on the data category. These errors and warnings will need to be corrected prior to the data being submitted to CAT.
This slide provides a summary of the drop-down menu selection for your reference. Please feel free to print this slide and use it when working on the DCT. Now let's look at how the member details page is laid out. When you're in the member's record, each tab displays an upper and a lower section. The upper section will display different information depending on which tab has been selected. The lower section will always show the member's payroll data. Changes to the member's payroll data or status can be changed in the lower section of any tab. Please note, the value for employee group must always be administration. The Personal tab displays the member's demographic information. This data is frozen and cannot be changed manually or with a data load. This is to ensure that the demographic information in the DCT is not accidentally overridden. If any changes are needed, please submit to CAT. The Summary tab displays the following. Reported data column reflects data that has been reported in year and/or imported by you. Calculated data column is the amount calculated by the DCT based on built-in specifications. It will use the payroll data and reported status changes to calculate the expected value. The difference column shows any differences between the reported data and the calculated data and will appear in this column. If there are any manual changes made, clicking the Recalculate button will update these numbers. Note, in the upper section, you can only change the pension adjustment amounts if needed. There's a comment section that you can use to enter any comments that may be helpful for validations. You can ignore the Retroactive Pays tab as it only applies to the DB Prime plan design. Any retroactive amounts paid to a DB Plus member should be included as part of their current year eligible earnings under regular earnings and reported in the year the payment was made. You must calculate contributions based on the contribution rates in effect at the time the retroactive payment is made. You can ignore the Partial Day Leaves tab as it applies to DB Prime plan design only. The Validation Result tab displays all the warnings and errors associated with the member. The first column is the override. If the member data is correct and an error is still appearing, you can contact your employer pension analyst to override the flag. When the flag has been overridden, a check mark will appear and the row will be highlighted in green. This step should be done at the very end after you run your final validations. Afterwards, your data can be submitted. Otherwise, if you run validations again, the checked flag will be removed. The field column shows what the warning or error relates to. For example, if the contributions are outside of tolerance. The reported value shows the data that was reported in the DCT. The expected value is what has been calculated by the DCT. The next column, error description, gives an idea for what must be corrected. The last column, severity, shows the type of validation, if it is a warning or an error. Errors must be fixed or overridden before the DCT can be submitted. However, data can be submitted with warnings. The Timeline tab is a visual of member status changes that have occurred throughout the plan year, January 1 to December 31. You can ignore the NC Status tab, as it applies to the employers with DB Prime plan design only.
Let's do a live demonstration of the member detail screen in DCT. During the demonstration, we will also cover two examples of the member details page, one for a member who has no in-year data and another for a member who has in-year data and on leave. We will open DCT and do a quick search for member Emily Random. The member details screen can be viewed either before or after your import files have been loaded. When pulling up a member, the member details screen will default to the Personal Data tab. The upper section will display the member's demographic information, which will include their last name, first name, gender, marital status, language preference, date of birth, hire date, and enrollment date. The lower section will display their status and payroll data. All members will have at least one record representing their status at the start of the plan year, January 1st. Or if they enrolled later in the year, the effective date will be their plan enrollment date. If a member had multiple events during the year, more records will appear. The record will include the effective date of their status, annual salary rate. You can ignore this field as it is not required for DB Plus plan members. The plan design, employment status, employee type, employee group, the employee and employer contribution rates, and the related earnings, contributions, and employer contributions for that status period. The lower section, status and payroll data, will always appear at the bottom of the member details screen, no matter what tab you're on. The Summary tab. This will display the reported contributions and pension adjustment. The service and RCA contributions are not applicable for DB Plus employers and are defaulted to 0. The Calculated section will show what DCT has calculated as the expected values based on the information provided. Any differences will be displayed under Difference. If there are any corrections made to a member's record, you can click Recalculate, and the values under the Calculated column will be updated. When reviewing the Summary tab, only the DB Plus fields will apply. As mentioned earlier, the Retroactive Pays tab, Partial Day Leaves tab, and NC Status tab do not apply for DB Plus members. The Validation Results tab. This will summarize all the errors and warnings triggered for this member. Errors and warnings could be the result of demographic or status and payroll data discrepancies. Please note, when you first log on to the DCT, there will be no errors or warnings as the validations have not yet been run, as you can see here. After the validations have been run and any errors or warnings have been fixed on a member's record, you can click Run Validation within the member's record to update the errors and warnings. This will run the validation for this member only. The requirement is to have no errors and warnings must be reviewed on a member's record. The Timeline tab. This provides a chronological sequence of the member's various status changes during the plan year. Let's run through a scenario for a DB Plus member with no in-year data, Jessica Purple. In the quick search field, we will type in her last name, Purple, and press enter. The member details page will open and default to the personal tab. As this member has no in-year data, DCT will only have their demographic data and the last status we had on file as of the prior year end, or as previously mentioned, the effective date of their plan enrollment if they enrolled in the plan later in the year. If there is no in-year data showing in the member's record, the cause may be due to 1, no in-year data was reported to CAT, 2, the member did not have a status change during the year. For example, someone who was active for the full year and had no breaks in service, or 3, CAT was not able to load this information into the DCT. We will now review the record for a member with in-year data. Going back to the home screen, we will do a quick search for Amy Eel. And press enter. In the lower section, under status and payroll data, we can see that this member had multiple in-year transactions throughout the year. The first record is the in-year data that was reported to CAT. It shows the earnings and employee and employer contributions from the start of the year or the date the member enrolled in the plan up to the day before the start of the leave. The next record reflects the effective date of their unpaid leave status, and the following is their return to work status.
We will now move on to exporting DCT data. You can export the DCT data and compare it to your active payroll records. The export files can be used for member reconciliations to determine if all in-year data was provided to CAT and to determine what files need to be imported as a result. There are 6 files available for export. However, only 3 are relevant for DB Plus employers. Member Demographic Information File. This file contains all the members in the plan as of December 31, 2020, and can be used to help determine if any members are missing from CAT records. For example, new plan enrollments not previously reported to CAT. Member Status Updates file. This file contains the in-year data reported to CAT throughout the year. For instance, leave notifications, terminations, retirements, and deaths. Member Earnings, Contributions, and Service file. For any status updates reported in the year, this file contains their earnings and contribution as of the effective status date. These data files can be exported at any point during the DCT process, either before and/or after your data has been imported. The exports for member prior year retroactive payments, member partial day leave, and members with NC status do not apply for DB Plus only employers.
Export files allow you to extract the data in the DCT so you can compare the CAT information to your records for payroll and member statuses. We strongly suggest you review these files and use them as a starting point to update your information with CAT. As Trina mentioned, you can export 3 data files from the DCT. Let us run through a simple example of checking the membership on the DCT and comparing it to your records. The various export files can be found under the Utilities tab. Select the drop-down and then Export Data. For this example, we will be selecting Member Demographic Information and then Download. In the pop-up window, you will be given the option to open the file to view or save it to your directory. Let's open the file. Suppose a few members joined the pension plan this year, but you're unsure if all their enrollment forms were sent to CAT. To help you identify any missing enrollments, let's compare the member demographic export with our employer payroll file. This member demographic information file will show you all the members for ABC DB Plus employer by SIN, including their name, date of birth, date of hire, and so on. When you extract, the output is in Excel format. We will bring up both files side by side and compare. Immediately, I notice that my membership count is off because my payroll file has 15 members, but the CAT file only has 14. Since my population is small and in the interest of time, we will sort the CAT file by surname and visually compare the two files to find the missing member. By doing this, I can see that John Sample, which we have already highlighted in yellow, is the member missing from the DCT. If you see that members are missing in the DCT, your responsibility is to immediately enroll the member into the CAT pension plan by enrolling them via the employer portal or sending in their enrollment form via SDoc. In the meantime, you can continue with the DCT by adding John Sample manually. To do this, open DCT. Under the Member Data dropdown, select New Member. When the new member window appears, complete the appropriate fields and click Create. For a small employer, visually comparing files is an option, but may not be practical for larger employer populations. VLOOKUPs are a good way to compare the CAT export files to your payroll files to determine the information you will need to update onto the DCT. The same process will apply when it comes to exporting the remaining files. Use this export feature to determine the information CAT already has and to compare it with your records. Once you've determined what is missing from the DCT, you can begin preparing your import files.
Now let us proceed with the employer data importing process. You will have to import the files in the following order. Status update file. If in your status changes were not reported to CAT, this file is required. Earnings and contributions file. If a status update file has been loaded, this file is required. Member information and year-end updates file contains all members with one row per member. Each row includes the total year-to-date earnings, contributions, and pension adjustment. It should include any in-year data that was reported to CAT previously or that has been updated during the DCT process. This is a required file. Going forward, I will refer to the member information and year-end updates file as a year-to-date file. When it comes to importing your files, the process is the same. The year-to-date and earnings and contributions import file contains separate columns to report the different employee contributions amounts, such as for regular and pregnancy, but it also has columns to report regular and pregnancy employer contribution amounts. Here is a table that reviews a couple of scenarios where certain columns must be used to report contributions. For your convenience, the green columns indicate employee contributions, while the blue columns represent employer contributions. The first example represents a member who has DB Plus regular contributions for the year. As employee and employer contribution rates are dependent on your participation agreement, please ensure to report contributions accordingly. The second example is for a member who is on a pregnancy leave and returns to active status later in the year. As you can see, contributions are allocated to their respective columns. If in-year data was not provided, you will have to import a status update file and earnings and contributions file prior to importing your year-to-date file. These files must be imported in that order. To start the import process, go to Utilities and select Import Data. The Upload Data File window will appear. Browse for the file and click Upload. In the next screen, the Select Import section will appear. The first section of the upper screen will show the first 20 rows of member data that has been pulled from the file being imported. Below that, In the Select a section to import, you will select the type of file being loaded, for example, a status update file or an earnings and contributions file. Be sure to select the correct import file, as this will help the system determine the type of mapping specifications to be populated on the next screen. The field mapping options will differ depending on the type of import file. To ensure the right data is loaded to the correct DCT data fields, it is very important that the applicable database column is selected. If your column headers match the field names exactly, DCT will map the fields for you. If they don't match, you will have to map the database headings to the appropriate source data file. Once complete, select Import Data. If there are fields that you do not need to load from your payroll file, you can select Skip, and the DCT will not import them. As a reminder, to ensure the right data is loaded to the correct data fields in DCT, it is very important that the correct data import file is selected. To assist you, these are the fields that will be applicable to you when mapping your import files. Please feel free to print the slide and use it when working on the DCT. If there are any problems during the data import, DCT will provide detailed error messages. If an error appears, it means the data for that record did not load. The error will show which line of data failed from the import file. It is recommended that you fix all errors to be sure all the data is loaded into the DCT. These errors will be on the import log. The import log can be found in the Reports dropdown under Error Reports, Import Log. There is a list of the various types of import errors in the DCT guide, along with suggestions on how to correct them. You can load these files multiple times. Any changes made to the file will update the member record in the DCT. If the data is the same, no information will be updated or deleted. There is no need to reset the data each time you load the file. Once you've successfully imported your data, the final step is the data validation. This can be done in one of two ways. On the Import Summary screen, once all the import records have been loaded, or by opening the drop-down menu in the navigation ribbon for member data, then clicking Run Validation. The data validations will take a few minutes to run, depending on the size of your member population. Once complete, you can view the various reports on the home screen under Data Problems and also under the Reports drop-down in the navigation ribbon.
Let's go into the DCT and do a live demonstration of the data import process and running data validations. As previously mentioned, the Data Problems report will show the total number of errors and warnings for each type of report. Prior to importing the data files and running data validations, most of the reports will show 0, as shown here. Please note, the Missing Info report will show you any members who have statuses that require payroll data. This count will change after you import your in-year data and run validations. After the data has been imported, the validation has been run, the system will analyze the imported data and generate the error reports. These counts under Data Problems will change. If your in-year data is not up to date, you will start with the status update file, followed by the earnings and contribution file, and lastly, the year-to-date file. For each file imported, we will review the import errors and at the end, run the data validations. Let us assume that after comparing the DCT status export file with our payroll data, Jane Sample was identified as being on a pregnancy leave effective February 5th, 2020, and returned to work on April 4th, 2020. As this return to work status was not reflected in her DCT data, we will start with importing the status update file. On the navigation ribbon, we will click the Utilities dropdown and select Import Data. When the Upload Data File window appears, we will browse and select Status Update File and click Upload. Once selected, we will see a snapshot of what's in the source data file. This will help to determine if the correct file was selected. In the lower section, select Status Update and click Proceed to Field Mapping. When the mapping window appears, we will map the appropriate fields for the Status Update file. Note, as my column headers for my import file match the database column names for the type of file I am importing, the Status Update file, no mapping was required for this example. Please refer to the DB Plus Employer Mapping slide for what you need to map. Click Import Data. For each file imported, you will need to review the import summary, as it will notify you of any import issues with the data load. In the import summary, there is an error at line 2, employment status, due to an invalid field value. Let's open our status import file and review the issue at line 2. Under the employment status column, we notice an incorrect field code. Instead of ACT for active, we have TAC. If we view this member on DCT, you will see that her active status was not loaded because of this incorrect employment status. We will minimize DCT and open the status update file to fix the issue. We will change the employment status from TAC to ACT, save, and follow the steps to re-import the status update file into the DCT. Do this by opening DCT, click the Utilities dropdown, and select Import Data. When the Upload Data File window appears, we will browse for the file and select Upload. In the following screen, we will select Status Update File and click Proceed to Field Mapping. We will review any fields that need mapping and click Import Data. This import summary now shows 0 errors. We will look at her DCT record to see what the data looks like. In it, we see that the active status has been loaded under the Status and Payroll Data section. The next step is to add the earnings and contributions for the pregnancy period. We know that she contributed through payroll deductions based on her status of PRG, Pregnancy Parental Leave, Payroll Deduction. We will repeat these steps for the Earnings and Contributions file. This file is used to upload earnings and employee and employer contributions for members with in-year statuses, for whom this data was not previously reported to CAT. We will click the Utilities dropdown and select Import Data. When the Upload Data File window appears, we will browse and select Earnings and Contributions file and click Upload. In the following screen, we will select Earnings and Contributions and click Proceed to Field Mapping. We will review any fields that need mapping and click Import Data. The import summary shows no errors with this file load. However, to make sure the data loaded as expected, we will go to the home page and pull up her member record. When her record opens, we will see her pregnancy earnings and pregnancy contributions populated in the lower section under Status and Payroll Data. Now that our in-year data is complete, we will proceed with loading our year-to-date file. However, before we do, let's open and review what's on the year-to-date file. This file should contain all members with 1 row per member. Each row includes the total year-to-date earnings, contributions, and pension adjustment. Regular earnings will be members' eligible earnings. This is outlined in the data import requirements. The demographic data. This data is frozen, so you cannot map these fields. You can keep the fields in your import file like I have, or remove them, whatever is easier for you. Just note, you cannot load these fields onto the DCT. This is to ensure that the data CAT has on file is not accidentally overwritten. If you need to make a change to a member's record, please submit a member change of information form to CAT. Now, let's load the year-to-date file. We will open DCT, click the Utilities dropdown, and select Import Data. When the Upload Data File window appears, we will browse and select Year-to-Date File, and then click Upload. The default on the next screen is Member Information and Year-End Updates, which is the option we need for our Year-End Updates file. We will click Proceed to Field Mapping. Here is an example of where I must manually map fields. Once mapped, click Import Data. Oh, looks like our import summary for the year-to-date file shows an error at line 14 with a message, member record does not exist in DCT, new or terminated in prior year. Let's open up my year-to-date file and check for line 14. Looking at the file, the issue involves member Mary Sunray. If we use the View Edit Data option under the Member Data dropdown, we can compare her SIN in the DCT to our year-to-date file. By doing this, we notice that the last digit of her SIN is incorrect. On the year-to-date file, we have 0 for the last digit, however, DCT has 6. We will change the last digit from 0 to 6 on the year-to-date file, save the year-to-date file, and reload the file to DCT. We will do this by clicking the Utilities dropdown and select Import Data. When the Upload Data File window appears, we will browse and select Year-to-Date File and click Upload. In the following screen, we will select Member Information and Year-End Updates and click Proceed to Field Mapping. We will review any fields that need mapping and click Import Data. The import summary now shows 0 errors, which means all records on my year-to-date file have been successfully loaded into the DCT, but the fun does not stop here. We now have to run the data validation to address any data errors and warnings. Under the member data, we will select Run Validation. Previously on the home screen, we showed most reports having 0 data problems. However, after loading the data and running the validations, the data problems section on the home screen now displays numbers. These data problems of errors and warnings must be investigated before we can proceed with the data submission. The requirement is to correct as many errors and warnings as possible, as data can only be submitted once each error has been investigated and cleared. If there are any errors that cannot be cleared, your employer pension analyst can override the error. Once overridden, you will see a green checked flag beside the error message in the override column. Note, this should be the last step before the data is submitted, as if you run validations again, any checked flags will be removed. Let's look at some validation problems. On the home screen, we will select DB+ PA Problems Report. On the report, we have Donald Soap, if we double-click his name and open up his record, we can view all his validations under the Validation Results tab. This DB Plus pension adjustment validation is telling me that his reported DB Plus pension adjustment is not within tolerance. If we click his Summary tab, we will see that his DB Plus pension adjustment field is blank. If we open up the year-to-date file and look under the column for DB Plus PA, this field for Donald Soap was left blank. However, we know based on our pension adjustment reporting, this value should be $15,465. This was just missed when preparing the year-to-date file. If we go back into the DCT, we can manually add the DB Plus pension adjustment in the total DB Plus pension adjustment field on the Summary tab. Once added, we can click Recalculate. By clicking Recalculate, the amounts now match what DCT calculated. We will go back to the Validation Result tab and rerun validation. Running the validation in this tab will validate this member's record only. Following our fix and rerunning of the validations, the pension adjustment warning has disappeared. Let's look at another data problems report for contributions. We will review the record for John Doe. After double-clicking his name, we will view his Validation Result tab. The validation is telling us that both the employee and employer reported contributions of $1,500 each is not matching the expected value of $500 each based on the earnings reported. After investigating and verifying the actual contribution amount with our payroll records, we will update the contribution fields in the lower section. Based on our records, we verified the earnings reported are correct. We will update the contributions for employee and employer from $1,500 to $500 each. After updating the contributions, we will go to the Summary tab and click Recalculate. By clicking Recalculate, the amounts now match what DCT calculated. We will go back to the Validation Results tab and rerun validation. You will see that the contribution errors have disappeared. These are just some of the errors that you will come across. In case you do not know how to clear the error, the DCT guide does have a list of validation warnings and errors along with corrective actions. If you have any trouble clearing errors, you can always contact your employer pension analyst. If you realize that you have made a mistake and would like to start over, for example, you realize that your file had incorrect pension adjustments, you can reset the data back to the way it was when it was released to you. To do this, under the Utilities dropdown, select Reset Data. But please remember, this will erase any imported data or manual changes made in the DCT. So please ensure that you truly want to reset this data. Once you have investigated and cleared the errors and applicable warnings and are ready to submit your DCT data, you must first run validations. In the event you need the employer pension analyst to override an error, this step must be done after you run your final validation. As previously mentioned, if you run validations again, the checked flag will be removed. When you are ready to submit, under the Member Data dropdown, select Send Data. Please note, once you click OK to confirm, your data will be locked. However, if you do submit by accident, you can always contact your employer pension analyst and they can unlock it for you. As there are multiple errors that have not yet been cleared, we are unable to complete this final step. Once your data has been successfully submitted, an email notification will be sent to CAT. As a friendly reminder, the submission deadline is March 15th. Before we proceed, are there any questions on what has been covered so far?
Hi, Evelyn. Thank you. There are no questions currently in the queue, so I'll pass it back to Trina.
Thank you.
On the next two slides, we have listed a few reminders that we would like to bring to your attention. Here are a few reminders to watch for when going through the DCT. Here are some additional reminders for you to consider. The slides are available on the website under the Employer tab within the Employer Education Guide. For employers who had in-year contribution rate change, please contact your employer pension analyst for more information. There are multiple resources available to employers during the data collection process. The DCT Guide, which is found under the Help menu in DCT, will be available Friday. This concludes the DCT overview. Now I will hand it over to Sean to review the contributions reconciliation process.
Thank you, Trina. The reconciliation process begins each year with the DCT being released to employers by our Employer Services team. On March 5th, 2021, an Excel workbook showing all contributions remitted for CAT pension plan for 2020 will be distributed via email. We will include CAT remittance information in one workbook. This workbook will contain the summary of CAT 2020 contributions. Here is an example of the CAT summary of 2020 pension contributions. This spreadsheet lists the aggregate remittance figures by type of contribution in each month of 2020, with totals on the right-hand side and at the bottom of the page. Please note the individual lines on this report list the amounts of monthly pregnancy parental payroll deductions. In summary, the key verification item would be to confirm that cash sent by the employer during the year agrees with CAT plan's records, and the type of contributions are accurately reported. If any corrections are required, please send them to me directly by email. My contact information will be provided on the last slide of this presentation. If discrepancies occur as a result of a CAT-made error, the summary will be updated. Otherwise, the discrepancies will be caught during DCT. The summary of contributions that you will receive is an official record and cannot be altered unless a mistake was made by the CAT finance team. All discrepancies will be caught when the DCT is done later on. Please make note of the deadline to bring forth any corrections. That deadline is March 19th, 2021. Please note that only if you have corrections if you do not have any corrections, you are not required to send an email. If no concerns are brought forward by the deadline of March 19th, 2020, the final versions will be shared by finance to the pension analysts. They will then prepare the schedule of adjustments and the summary data report. Finance will then use these reports to prepare the annual statement of contributions. On this slide, you will see an example of the CAT pension plan annual statement of contributions. The annual statement of contributions pulls all the information together in one place. The first line shows the subtotal of regular and pregnancy parental payroll deductions from the original master employer DCT file submission. The second line reconciles this figure to the final total of what should have been remitted as reported on the summary DCT file. This is then compared to the actual cash received below, with the difference formulating an outstanding balance due to or from CAT pension plan. If you are sending payment by EFT, please send payment to CIBC Mellon in your regular fashion. At the same time that you're submitting your payment, you should also send in your invoice to CIBC Mellon and Cat Finance via email. The information is listed on this slide. If you are sending payment by check, please send the check along with the invoice to CIBC Mellon in your regular fashion. The address is shown above. In the case where there is a balance due to the employer, please look at the member and employer column and total column in the annual statement to determine the amount available as a credit. Please claim this credit against your next monthly remittance by showing a credit on this CAT and RCA contribution remittance summary, also known as Form 34A, under credits for employers. Here you can see an example of such a credit on the contribution remittance summary form, also known as 34A. This is the form used monthly for contributions. Please remember to retrieve the relevant contribution remittance form from our website at the time when you prepare each remittance. This will ensure the most current version of this form is being used each time. This concludes the finance portion of today's conference. You can always contact myself or Macy with any questions. This slide contains our contact information.
So this concludes our presentation for today. So as always, we ask that you provide your employer pension analyst with a list of who attended today's session so that we may track this information on your behalf. This attendance information will then be provided back to you quarterly and again at the end of the year as part of the annual attestation process. You will be receiving an email with a link to a brief survey after today's session. Your responses will help us in making these training sessions more valuable to you. So thanks again, everyone, for attending today, and have a wonderful day. Thanks.